Time now to get an update from the oil bucket list. This is a list of stocks that's updated regularly by our guest here in the studio today, Malcolm Graham Wood from MalcysBlog.com. Malcy, good to talk to you.
Morning, nice to see you again.
Now, this bucket list appears on your blog, MalcysBlog.com, so anybody watching this can get an update on where the most recent companies are that appear on the list. But first of all, before we get to the stocks we're going to talk about today, there's a small handful of really interesting companies to discuss. What about the year to date so far for oil caps, small caps generally, but the bucket list particularly?
Well, it's been a mixed bag, actually. I mean, given that the oil prices had a very good start to the year, I mean, it crashed sharply in the last quarter of last year for a number of reasons, and it's picked up very nicely indeed. It's probably in some cases up 40%, but quite a lot of the companies in the bucket list haven't yet picked up by 40%. One or two have done a bit better, but that's the reason for the bucket list. It's meant to be, you know, no one ever does it, but I mean the reason for it was to try and pick a bucket list of stocks that some of whom would do better in different circumstances, but hopefully not too many really damaging ones. There are ones in there where there are one-off well results to come and so on, which is fair enough, but they're tempered by stocks which are much lower risk. Yeah,
this is of course the problem, isn't it, about these small cap oil stocks? They can drill into what they perceive to be oil, and of course it turns out to be empty. I want to bring up one stock first of all, if we can, Eco Atlantic Oil and Gas. Now, you spoke recently to the chief executive, Gil Holtzman, didn't you? We had him here in the studio actually just a couple of months ago talking about this. And look at the start of this year, 2019, that stock was 38.8 pence. 78 pence is where we are now. We're off the highs. This is an amazing story, but we're still awaiting, of course, proof that they've got oil.
Well, this is a most exciting stock. I got hold of it about 2 years ago. As once I'd had a long session with the company. This beginning of last year, I put it into the bucket list. Even though I didn't think the action was going to be until this year, I knew that it would be a real exciting stock, and I didn't want to miss out on it. And of course, it went into the bucket list at 20p in February of last year. But then, you know, it went up quite sharply, and then, you know, the big rise has obviously happened since last autumn, and the only reason it's come off the top slightly is, of course, they raised a bit of money a few weeks ago just to make sure, ahead of the drilling campaign, that they had plenty of money in the bank to drill all the wells. They are funded by the money they got from Total, where they farmed out some of the acreage in Guyana, and so there's a 2-well drilling program starting in a month's time, second week in June. They're going to drill 2 prospects, Jethro and Joe. But the exciting thing, of course, is not just because they're drilling with Tullow and Total in Guyana. It's the fact that Exxon are in the block next door and have had something like 30 consecutive discoveries. And in fact, one of the discoveries actually runs into their block, the Orinduit block. So one of the Exxon discoveries is almost certainly going to be part and parcel. So, you know, the excitement for Eco is now that they've got a solid shareholder list, they're funded well, they've got a decent stake in Ghana. They've also got acreage in Namibia, which they probably would have drilled something by now if it hadn't been so exciting in Guyana. So, and Namibia looks quite exciting for the next few months, because ironically Exxon have gone into there as well, big time.
If there's a bit of a disappointment in June, or when they start to get the results back from the drilling program, what about the share price? What is it pricing in? Now, is it pricing in a firm, definite positive result, or do you think?
Well, there'd be no doubt that if either or both of those wells were dry holes, dusters,
both are,
if let's say they were both dusters, then it would be a big disappointment. But they're only drilling 2 of the prospects, and they've got between 10 and 20 potential leads and prospects to drill. And these 2 wells are being drilled in the tertiary at the north end of the block, and all the action with Exxon is in the southeast of the block. So, you know, I think it would be an opportunity rather than something going horribly wrong. You know, the area is full of oil.
When you took this on, as you say, at 20 pence, you were talking then about a 10-bagger. That would be £2. Here we are now at 78. Are you still sticking?
Oh, no doubt at all. In fact, you know, if these wells were to come in and then they go back, I mean, they're not going to go and drill 2 and then 6 more straight away. Right. I would expect them to drill the two, depending on the success, take it back to Tullow and Total, take it back and analyse it, see whereabouts they want to drill the rest of the block. So you might find that towards if it came in, there'd be a decent rally in the stock, but it might be quieting down a little bit towards the end of the year as they decide where they're going to go. But no, I mean, if these wells were to come in and were to get anything like the progress that Exxon had made next door, £2, to be honest, is quite conservative for this company. Yeah. Quite conservative.
Let's move on. Take a look at another stock, standalone stock, Hurricane Energy. Standalone because it's got this fractured basement technology, which, of course, we don't know yet if it works. Do we really? I mean, we're hoping for first oil in the second
we don't know. Standalone regarding fractured basement is correct, but standalone on Lancaster, which is what you're talking about, is not in 100% correct because they are drilling elsewhere at the moment. So first of all, taking a look at Lancaster, yes, they've tied up the Lancaster wells, the two wells which they were going to produce from, and at the moment they're spending all the time checking the reservoir performance and the qualities and everything else. I'm expecting them to announce at some stage there'll be a production, but again, in order to make sure that the reservoir is handled properly, I don't think they'll go flat out at 17,000 barrels a day straight away, but that's the plan in due course, and they would like to have 3 to 6 months worth of data from producing. If you're one of those people who don't believe it's going to happen, and the fractured basement is wrong, and I'm not one of those people, then the production will tail off, or it'll be water producing or whatever. But more importantly, I mean, there are such huge numbers in Hurricane's potential that what else they're doing is almost more important. They did a deal with Spirit, which is part of Centrica, or is partly owned by Centrica, and Spirit are carrying them on 6 wells, 3 this year and 3 next year, on a thing called the Greater Warwick area, which is just nearby. And if these 3 wells were to come in, and they're drilling the first one at the moment, and ironically we might get some news from that well before too long. They're drilling Warwick Deep. And they're going to keep these open as producers, and the wells are going to stay in touch with each other. So there is much more than just Lancaster for Hurricane at the moment. But the shares have stayed the same for quite a long time, because they stayed at sort of about 40p, 45p, whatever it is, because all the people who believe it are in. Yeah. And all the people who don't believe it are out now. So, I'm just waiting for the news from Lancaster, and then I'm looking for news from Greater Warwick area.
What about the share price? I mean, the company's almost gone into purdah. We've been trying to get in touch with them, but they won't speak. And of course, I know you do have you've had a chat relatively recently, with Robert Trice, the CEO. What are your feelings about this? You're obviously a positive.
Well, I mean, I think that the numbers, as I just said, are so vast that if it was to come in, the shares are chronically undervalued.
By what sort of degree?
And the reason that they're undervalued at 45 or 50p or whatever it happens to be, is because there are still enough people out there who believe it's not going to work. But I wouldn't say that it'll be a 10-bagger from here. But this is a company which has got a valuation of less than £1 billion in market cap, and yet, looking at what they could be looking at just forget Lancaster, in the Greater Warwick, they're looking at 900 million barrels of oil. Right. And so if it all works, this is a huge company, and they'll be doing farm outs, and they'll get takeover bids and all sorts of things. But in the meantime, we really got to let them go and do the hard work, subsurface hard work at Lancaster and at Greater Warwick, and then the 2 wells that they're going to drill after that. But it is it'll be an absolutely game-changing year for Hurricane this year.
Good. Okay, I want to move on if I can. Now, when we discuss the stocks that we're going to be talking about, you wanted to have 2 groups to look at, and you want to talk about Morocco.
Yeah.
Give us a couple of stocks you're watching in the Moroccan area.
Well, I'm looking at Morocco because I spoke at their conference earlier in the year in February, where I was the guest of the State Oil Company, and the State Oil Company are bending over backwards to make sure that companies come into the country, they get a very advantageous fiscal rates with low tax rates and so on, and very high gas prices. So we're talking about Sound Energy, who came into this country very early doors. They're testing the Tendrara at the moment, and it's taken a lot longer than people thought. But
is that why shares are down?
Yes, I think so. Just people saying, let's wait and see, what the news is from Tendrara. But there's potential upside from there. We've looked at SDX Energy. Their Morocco acreage has been continuing to deliver successful wells time after time, and it's amongst the highest margin business worldwide you can get. I mean, they're producing for less than $1, probably half $1 an MCF, and the prices in Morocco $10.5, $11 an MCF as they move away from diesel and bottled gas and everything else. So, SDX has been hit. The share price that you can see has been hit because they've had a delay on their Egypt production. That was due to come in any minute now, and it's been held up just through negotiation. I mean, the kit is all there. We're all going to see it next month. It's delivering the gas. It is just a question of the legal contractual details. And SDX quite rightly saying, we're not going to go ahead and do this unless we got exactly right. The third one I want to talk about is Chariot. Now, Chariot announced recently. Chariot have had 2 big dry holes in the last year in Morocco and Namibia, but the more important thing is that they were awarded a thing called the Lixus license, which again has got gas in it. It's got a discovered gas discovery called Anchois-1, and they've announced this morning that the CPR gives them a significantly higher number than they thought. So they've got not just Anchois-1, but they've got Anchois satellites, and they've been given a big number for the North satellite. Again, this will be producing gas into a high gas price marketplace, significant demand. Morocco is a huge demander of gas for industry and the country as a whole. So they're in a very strong position there, and I think that the deal that they've done in Lexus and the announcement today on the CPR is very strong. And then you've got a company called Predator, run by Paul Griffiths, who is a very smart guy indeed, and he has a huge amount. The good thing about this is that he's got a huge amount of this himself. So you're not going to see dilution. Predator are also in Trinidad and Ireland, but they've announced some very exciting license in Morocco again, and I can see them being popular. So what I'm saying here is that for those, I don't think often retail investors say, let's think of a country and have a look at it, but all those companies are doing well, being successful in the company where the bottom line is that the gas price is very high, so anything you discover is very high margin.
So why are the share prices in the likes of SDX and Sound and Chariot so low, relatively speaking?
Well, they've all got individuals. So Sound is low because it's taken a long time to get this far in terms of the when we are now, Sound are now testing the Tendrara T10 well. That's taken quite a long time to get going, and people were worried about that. SDX, it's because I told you about the Egypt thing. Predator haven't been weak because all their other things are doing well, and I think that Chariot, it's actually Chariot has recently started to pick up quite nicely on a recent chart, but the falls were due to 2 extremely high risk wells which they drilled last year and were unsuccessful. But if you look at it, I looked at the price of Chariot this morning, it's 5.3p. Yeah. There's 4p of cash in Chariot.
Right, okay.
So they've got this new the Lixus license with a discovery on it of gas, easily get into the marketplace in Morocco.
Okay, South America, I think, is the other region you wanted to talk about and group a number of companies around.
Yeah, and those companies, haven't been enormously good on the oil price, although they've been highly successful. And I'm talking about probably Echo and President and Amerisur here. So Amerisur first is a mystery to me at the moment because they've done 2 or 3 really, really solid things. First of all, if you remember way back, they got the OBA pipeline, which is their pipeline through into Ecuador, which they can sell their own crude from the Putumayo in southern Colombia. So that's been successful, and they announced yesterday or the day before yesterday, that they were now selling third-party crude through that pipeline, which will be very good indeed. It'll just be like taking a tariff. Second thing is in the north, where they've got CPO-5, where they're partnered with ONGC, the Indians. They've had a very big discovery there, which follows on from a previous discovery. So 2 discoveries, then they had 1 exploration well as a step out, which didn't come in. And of course people thought, oh, it's all over. CPO-5 is worth a fortune for America, and probably 2 or 3 times the share price on its own, because the share price is so low. And finally, they did a deal with Occidental, where they, Occidental farmed into, Occidental Colombia, that is, farmed into their acreage, which brings forward drilling in their acreage by 2 years, because it would be, otherwise they would be spending money on other things. So, America have done a combination of things. The share price is ludicrously cheap.
Yeah.
Then, if you're looking at other ones, of course, President Energy, which at the end of last year came in several times. You can see towards the end of the year, they had several successful wells, and their production went up to over 3,000 barrels a day, which gives them a huge cash flow. And then they decided, they're putting that cash flow all into the capex for this year, and then looking at the capex, they decided to raise a bit more money at 9p, and you can see
just below that at the moment.
And they're below that. They shouldn't be. You can ask whether they should have raised the money or not, but in my view, it was a very solid decision, because they've got so many opportunities for drilling where they are that these things pay back in no time at all. So that stock is very cheap. And of course, Echo in Argentina has been weak because we're waiting. They're doing the 3D on. The big prospect for Echo is called Tapiaiki, and they're doing the 3D on that at the moment. So whilst they're doing the 3D, no point in trying to pick and choose where your drilling locations are going to be. I think they've got a 4-well drilling program, which might start at the end of this year. Certainly it'll be in the first quarter of next year. That is just one of those things that when there's not a lot going on, investors decide to invest in other things for the time being. Doesn't mean to see the valuation isn't there.
Yeah. Look, we've got to leave it there, but thank you so much indeed for dropping by, Malcy. It's good to talk to you again. Malcolm Grahamwood is from MalcysBlog.com, and you can catch up with more from Malcy on his website with that bucket list and with regular updates on a daily basis.